Good morning. Guess where we are? We are at Coastal Coffee Roasters in downtown Summerville, and I have another amazing guest today. And he is a true Lowcountry legend, and I cannot wait to introduce you. But I'm going to let him introduce himself and tell you who he is.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bill Sharpe, and it's a pleasure to be here with my friends.
We managed to get him to sit down with us. I don't know how we did it, but I did. So I'm happy about that. I have so many questions for him. Okay, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your career, especially that's, maybe new people that's moving into the area that they might not know exactly how wonderful you are.
Well, that's awfully nice of you to say that, Julie. I I grew up in Charleston, West Ashley, and went to St. Andrews High School. It's no longer existing. It's now West Ashley High, but it used to be St. Andrews. I went off to college in Atlanta at Emory University, and during the summers when I was in college, I would do radio work, radio news work, not TV, radio. And then when I graduated from Emory in 1972, I came back and wanted to get a full-time job. So I started in radio full-time as a news guy, an afternoon news guy. And I told myself that I would give myself a year in Charleston, and then I would move back to the big city of Hotlanta and see if I could pursue my life goals. I didn't know what they were at that time. So I gave myself a year, and at the end of that year, which would have been 1973, I gave my notice, and they were very nice. And then I worked in another radio station part time, getting ready to save my money and head back to Atlanta to pursue my fame and fortune, I thought. And I got a call about a month before I was going to head back to Atlanta. And it was from a guy on TV here whom everybody knew. He was a big celebrity. His name was Carroll Godwin. And Carroll said to me, Bill, I understand you do some pretty good things. And you come highly recommended by one of your fellow students at St. Andrews High. And I said, oh, who was that? And he told me. And he said, I've got an opening for the news at 11 o'clock. Would you like to try out, audition? And I said, I don't know, Carol, let me think about it. So I still wanted to go back to Atlanta, but I thanked him and went home to see mom and dad. And they said, are you crazy? You got a call from the number one TV personality in Charleston at the number one television station, and you told him you'd think about it? Well, I had a strong mother figure, and she said, they called me Billy when I was growing up. And she said, Billy, here's what I want you to do. I said, well, Mom, if I audition, I'm going to have to shave every day and get a haircut. Because in radio, it doesn't matter what you look like, really. She said, so what? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to get a haircut, shave, and call him back tomorrow. I said, tomorrow? She said, tomorrow, and set up an audition. So I shaved, got a haircut, called him up, set up an audition for the next week. And I went in, and I had been reading news for radio for a long time. By then, 4 or 5 years. And television I looked at it as just a camera. Plus, it's just like radio with a camera. So I would read the copy that he gave me, and I'd look up ever so often at the camera and look back at the copy. It was easy. It was the same thing I'd been doing except with a camera for 4 years. So when it was all over, I was a cocky kid. I knew I had the job because it was so easy. And he said to me after the audition, he said, well, that was very good. He said, but we have another guy too who's auditioning. So it is you and he who are the two people. And I said, okay. but I knew I had the job. And sure enough, the following week, he called me and said, you got it. So that's how it started at Channel 5.
You have been there a long time. And I know you must have a lot of stories. Is during your career, which you can elaborate how long you were there, but is there one story in mind out of all the stories that touched you or made a difference somehow or really impacted you?
Well, I'll tell you two stories um, that that affected me greatly. When I was a young man, I would go out with my buds to the bars and on Saturday night, and we'd have a drink and just have fun until the bars would close. And back then, Julie, the bars stayed open 3, 4 in the morning. So one day, my buds and I went to this bar, and I had a couple of beers, and I said to them, you know, it's 2 in the morning, it's time to go. And they said, well, Bill, why don't we meet you at the Waffle House down the road? Everybody will get in his car or her car. We'll meet you. I said, okay. So I thought, why not? Why not a piece of pie to cap my day? It sounded good. So this was about 2 in the morning. I can't believe I stayed up that late back then. But when you're a young man, you do things differently than when you're an old man like me. So I said, okay. So as I was coming out of the bar, and it was a neighborhood bar, friendly bar, as I was coming out of the bar, I saw this woman crying. She's very pretty. I didn't know her, but I thought I'm going to cheer her up. So I talked to her and I said, hey, dry those tears. Why don't you come meet me and my buddies at the place just down the road at the Waffle House, and I'll buy you a piece of pie. And she smiled. I could see the tears were drying up. I didn't ask her what was wrong. She said, okay. And I told her my name. I said, I'm Bill Sharpe, and I'll meet you there with my friends. Okay. Well, she parked closer to the Waffle House than I did, so it took me longer to get there than it took her when she went to her car to drive to the Waffle House. So when I got to the Waffle House and I was going to park in the parking lot, there was a car lengthwise blocking the parking in the Waffle House. And I thought, somebody's got to talk to this guy, get him to move his car. I can't park my car. And I'm meeting my friends and this young lady whom I was bound and determined to cheer up. So I go up to the car, and there's a guy walking around the car, just walking around the car. And I said, sir, is that your car? He said, yeah. I said, well, you're blocking my way. Can you move? Now, by now, it's about 2:30 in the morning. The Waffle House was packed Saturday night. Well, Sunday morning, wasn't it? He said, so as he's walking around the car, he said, I just shot my wife. I said, you what? He said, I just shot and killed my wife. I said, show me the gun. I was mad, which was stupid, but I was. So I said, show me the gun. He said, okay. So he opened his car door, and there on the front seat was a long rifle. I think it was a shotgun, but it could have been a rifle. I said, you stay right here. I'm calling the cops. He said, okay. I said, where's your wife, whom you shot? He said, she's right here. So I walked around the car, and there she was on the ground. And I looked at her, and I could tell she was gone. She was dead. So I ran in the Waffle House. I got a guy to come out, and I said, do you know artificial resuscitation? Can you give her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation? He says, yeah, I know it. I've studied it. I said, well, let's do it. Maybe you can save her life. He couldn't. She was dead. So I got another guy in the Waffle House to call the cops. In the meantime, the guy who shot his wife kept just sort of walking around the car. I said, buddy, I told you, stay here. We're calling the cops. You got it? And he said, okay. So sure enough, the cops came, arrested him for murdering his wife. I didn't realize it till the next day. The wife he'd murdered was the woman I'd invited from the bar to the Waffle House. I had no idea who she was. And so fast forward to several months later, and he went on trial for murdering his wife. And guess who the prime prosecution witness was? Me. So I got on the witness stand and testified that he told me that he'd shot his wife and they sent him away for life. Sad story.
That is a really, really, really sad story, especially since, you were a part of it, from the beginning to the end. So, but I mean, that has to make you feel some kind of way, though, that you gave her that moment before something tragic ended her life.
That's a good way to look at it. He had been stalking her. It came out at the bar. He apparently was at the bar where we were, had stalked her there and was following her from the bar to the Waffle House. It was a real tragedy, and that affected me a lot. I felt guilty for inviting her to the Waffle House. I didn't know her, but I think he was after her no matter what. If it hadn't been at the Waffle House, it would have been at the bar. If it hadn't been at the bar, it would have been at their home. Who knows? Anyway, he died in prison, and it was sad. It was sad.
All right, let's try to turn this around. Okay, how about like a story you covered or something during your time? And you were there 48 years? Okay, so 48 years during your time there. Think of a good story or something that you were like really, you remember in a good way.
Well, this is another story. It's not exactly a good story, but it's not a bad story. It's an interesting story. One day, it was in December. It was like 4 or 5 days before Christmas, and I was feeling good. I went out to lunch, and I came back, and the station back then was at 485 East Bay Street downtown in Charleston. So as I came in, I went into the lobby, and I saw TV reporters lined up across the street from the competition, Channel 4 and Channel 2 and radio news. And I'm thinking, that's what I would do. You'd line up for an interview with somebody. So I'm thinking, this is weird. What are they doing opposite us at Channel 5? So I opened the door, saw somebody from the other station whom I recognized, and I said, hey, Frank, what's going on here? Is there a story around here? He said, do you have any comment, Bill? I said, comment about what? And so they started coming toward me across the street. East Bay is a busy street, so they had to be careful. So I realized something's going on. I don't know. I better find out. So I said, let me check on that for you. I closed the door. And as I come back in the station, I'm still thinking about Christmas, right? But it struck me as odd. Like I was the object of all of these people. I usually am on the other side, and I'm, looking to interview people. And now I was the potential interviewee. So as I walk back in the lobby, I hear a police officer on the second floor talking to the boss man at my place, the general manager, saying, you have the right to remain silent. Anything and everything you say can be used against you. And I'm thinking, my goodness, this is my boss of the TV station. So the officer comes down and he says, Bill, you and Debbie Chard and a reporter and the general manager are all under arrest. And I said, for what? He said, well, we'll tell you that at your bond hearing. Put your hands in front of your face, in front of your body. And I did. And they handcuffed me, handcuffed Debbie, handcuffed the general manager, the boss man, and then handcuffed the reporter who ran the story. So we all go in a police car. Now, to their credit, Julie, we were allowed to be handcuffed in front, not in the back, because they knew we weren't dangerous. We were reporters. So they all sent us down to the jail. And I don't know if you've ever been in jail, but that was an eye-opening.
No, I have not.
Good. You don't want to go. It was an eye-opening, scary experience as I walked by the cells, they all recognized me, right? And they were reaching through the cells to try to touch me. Bill, 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 hey, Bill, what's going on? Bill, 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 what's going on? I'm thinking, man, I hope I don't get time in here for a while. But they were friendly, but they were trying to reach through. And I saw so many arms coming out, trying to touch me. And I was far enough away that they didn't. So we go before the judge in the jail, and he says, we're going to release you all on your own recognizance, which means we didn't have to put any money down to get out of jail. So we were released. So then we go back to the station. And I said, okay, tell me what this is all about. And the boss man said, Bill, we were arrested by the prosecutor. Back then, we called them solicitors. And his name was Charlie Condon, who, by the way, is a good friend of mine now, 50, 40, 30 years later. He said, but my boss said, we were arrested for obstructing justice. I said, what did we do? He said, we ran a picture of a murder-rape suspect against his will, against what he wanted, and he felt like we prejudiced potential witnesses to the murder-rape of a woman in the Lowcountry. What we had done, we got the suspect's picture from a yearbook, an annual, at his school, and had shown that high school picture. Well, there's something called freedom of the press in this country, which means you may not like what I do as a reporter or an anchor, but we have the right, within reason, to do things, to publish unpopular pictures or do unpopular stories. So the next day, he dropped the charges, the prosecutor, Charlie Condon. But he made his point. And he said in his statement, these people at Channel 5 destroyed my case. They have prejudiced not only the jury, potential jury for this guy, they have prejudiced witnesses who I was going to put the suspect in a lineup. Now they know what he looks like. They have destroyed my case. So the public, who had loved us, just turned against us. It was terrible. We got hate mails. We didn't have emails back then, but we got a lot of hate mail. The only thing that saved us was the fact that even though people in the general public hated us, despised us for what we did, they didn't think we should have been arrested for it. So we had attorneys coming out of the woodwork offering for free to defend us. Well, it was such a big case, CBS News came down to interview us about the case and did a live remote with Debbie, who was the news director, and the general manager from one of our studios, and they had the interview live in New York from here. We microwaved it back. And so that was an interesting story. As it turned out, later, that guy turned out not to be the real rapist and murderer, somebody else.
Is there a particular person that you interviewed that had an impact in some way, good or bad? Hopefully a good one.
Oh, there have been so many people I've interviewed that have had just wonderful impacts on me. I've interviewed every president going back to Gerald Ford, who was a nice guy. Probably my best interview of presidential candidates. Some of them weren't president yet, but I knew they would be. Two of my faves. I interviewed Ronald Reagan and his wife Nancy. Had a good interview with him. He was a neat guy, funny guy, had jokes, a lot of jokes. Barack Obama was standoffish. He was kind of, who is this guy and what's he asking me? But he answered my questions, but he was kind of standoffish. His wife, on the other hand, was just great, very friendly. But the interview that I really enjoyed the most was Donald Trump. Number one, Trump is very savvy with the media because he was a media star. You know, he did that show on TV, and so he knows the media. And I remember um, his punchline, if you remember from that show, was "You're fired. Sorry, but you're fired." Remember that?
Yeah.
So I had told him before the interview about my son William, my special needs son William, and William's favorite line is "You're fired." So at the end of the interview with now President Trump, he was not president back then, almost. The president looked in the camera and he said, "William, you got a great daddy, but I got some news for you." Pointed his finger at the camera. He says, "You're fired." And I burst into laughing. It was funny, and I wish I could find it. So I showed it to William, and he just laughed and laughed and laughed. That was one of my favorite interviews. After the interview was over, and I had to fight for that interview, by the way, Mr. Trump, President Trump, said, "Bill, how am I going to do in the South Carolina primary, which was coming up in about a week, about 10 days?" I said, "Mr. Trump," again, he wasn't president back then. I said, "Mr. Trump, you'll win it, I believe, and win it handily, easily." And sure enough, he did.
Do you miss it? Do you miss being behind broadcasting and doing your interviews? I mean, how long have you been retired now?
Julie, I've been retired since 2021, so it's been a little over 4 years, just over 4 years. I do miss it. I miss it a lot. I don't miss the stress, the 10-hour days, the pressure. Um, but I miss the interviews here with people, important people, fun people, like you.
Okay, I want to kind of shift this a little bit now. Okay, so I read that you went and you testified for lawmakers for the South Carolina for bullying. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that's impacted you?
Well, I've got a special needs little fella named William, who is a royal pain in my you know what, but he's the love of my heart. And William's got a mouth on him. He loves to say crazy things because he knows he gets attention. He's very, very bright. He can't read, he can't write, but he's a very smart little fellow. He's got something called Costello syndrome, like Abbott and Costello, the comedians before your time and my time. So he's got Costello syndrome, and he's done very well with it, and he's now very healthy. He's got an immune system that would make yours and mine look pale in comparisons. Healthy guy. Loves to talk. Wonder where he gets that from. So one day, he was in high school. They mainstream now, which is a wonderful thing for special needs kids. They mainstream them with quote unquote regular kids, and that was great for William. Great for William. But one day, the nurse called me, the nurse and his teacher, and said, "Bill, you got to come to the school." A much bigger student took William and raised him up and threw him down, and he hit his head. So I came to the school and picked up William. Thank goodness he was okay, didn't lose consciousness. But that happened several times, not just from one guy. It happened from several different people. They would hurt him, throw him down, hit him, bully him. And I thought, enough's enough. This is crazy. He's a special needs kid, you know? Why are people bullying my special needs son? So I got fed up. So I called a friend in the legislature, and he said, "Bill, you need to testify before us." I said, "Okay, I'll do it." So I did. And I said, bullying's bad enough when you're a quote unquote normal student. But if it happens to a special needs student, there's no place in hell for somebody who does that. It's beyond the pale. And so I testified and got some good response. I don't think we changed any bullying laws, but at least we made the lawmakers more aware of the evils of other students bullying students, especially special needs students like my son.
Okay, we can be here all day because He has a lot of good stuff to talk about and stories I want to hear. We're going to have him back too. All right. I thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And I know a lot of people will appreciate this too. Do you have anything you'd like to add or say at the end of this?
Just thanks for your interest, Julie, and thanks for I am so grateful to the Lowcountry because for 48 years they tuned in and watched us, and I feel like they were friends, and so I'm grateful. I had a great job, and met a lot of nice people like you, and it's just wonderful. The Lowcountry is a wonderful place with a lot of good people in it. So I feel fortunate that I've met so many friends and was able to give the news to so many people for so long.
Well, we appreciate that you did do that. It was a pleasure, really. All right, we're leaving from here. All right. See you guys
Bye.
later. Bye.